BBC Radio Leeds.
Every Monday afternoon between 2 and 3, we get up close with one of West Yorkshire's extraordinary people. Jacqui Harrison is here from Brickhouse. A life really that's not been defined by, but certainly shaped by Huntington's disease. She had to make the decision about whether or not to have the test to see if she also would develop it in later life. She's campaigning now to raise awareness. So we've got Jacqui Harrison here on the Big Yorkshire phone in up close.
Your station for Yorkshire.
BBC Radio Leeds.
I'm Liz Green, welcome. And don't go anywhere, we're up close with one of West Yorkshire's remarkable people. Jacqui Harrison is here. Tell you more in a minute. It's Spandau Ballet. Afternoon, I'm Liz Green. Now, every Monday afternoon at 2, we meet the extraordinary people of West Yorkshire up close. And this afternoon, a woman whose life has been shaped by a disease which affects about 8,500 people in the UK. But then you have to add to that about another 25,000 will develop it when they're older. Now, she's had to decide whether to have the test, which would tell her if she's going to develop this disease, an illness, which genetically she has a 50-50 chance of getting. It's killed her mother, her uncle and her grandfather. And this woman took the decision to have that test. The disease we're talking about is Huntington's. And the person we're going to meet is Jacqui Harrison, who lives in Brickhouse with her partner of over 30 years, Tony. And she is the full-time carer for her younger brother, Mark. And he has Huntington's. You can imagine the impact this disease has had on her life and day-to-day existence. And she's now raising awareness about this disease, of which, of course, many people know absolutely nothing. Welcome up close to Jacqui Harrison. How are you?
Okay.
I'm glad that you're here. Thank you very much. Can I just talk about the test you had to decide to take first, and then we'll talk about that journey that's just been all your life, really. But you had the opportunity to take it, and you decided you would. I am assuming that was a very tough call about knowing that they could determine if you were someone likely to develop this disease.
Yes, very tough. I think only about 15-20% of people at risk of having the disease take the test. So it's a very, very low number. And you have to go through quite an extensive counselling process that I did with Radio 4 actually in tow when I did it. I think it went on for about 18 months, so a lot of appointments, a lot of thinking about what if.
Did you ever change your mind along that process?
You waver a lot. I think you waver a lot. I'm not an optimist, I'm a pessimist. So I think when you're surrounded with it, you kind of think you're always going to get it. It's your destiny. Nobody else in the family has escaped, so why would I escape? And I think even if your result is negative, you don't escape it because you've got all that family history. You've lost parents with it, siblings with it, people with bigger families, cousins, brothers and sisters. So I think even a negative result has a massive impact for people. And obviously, if they get a positive result, that's a huge impact, because a positive result means you will go on to develop Huntington's disease. And though the science is racing quickly at the moment, there isn't a cure. So there are a few treatments that can treat depression, a couple of the symptoms, but there isn't a magic pill to take.
What was the result?
So I tested negative. So I will not get Huntington's. We've not got any children. So and Mark's not got any children. So my family, it's finished now. It's funny, the producer, we did a little talk on another radio station. Somebody said, what sort of programme would it have been if you tested positive? And she said, I don't know. And she said, I crossed a bit of a boundary, because you can hear the mic rattling. And she said it was her crying with us because she'd been there but waiting in that room. Well, you don't wait, actually. There's a protocol, and it was quite strict. So the geneticist explained it. You have the blood taken after the counselling, and then 4 weeks later they get the results. And she said there won't be any opening of envelopes and kind of sighing and umming and ahhing. She says you will walk in that room and I will sit you down, and you will know straight away. But just sort of sitting to go into that room and waiting to arrive, just horrific.
The relief. and it was negative, despite the fact it's still very much part of your life, as we'll discover. But I think I'd have fallen on the floor with relief.
Pretty much
Did
crumbled,
you feel like that?
Yeah, absolutely, sort of crumbled, really. Because you've thought about every time you drop something, oh, is that a sign? Every time you kind of shout at somebody, oh, is that a sign? Every time you forget something, is that a sign? And you kind of can broaden it out, really, can't you? Because genetics is a huge thing, and things like Alzheimer's, ultimately, there might be a test, and people out of Huntington's are going to perhaps be put into this situation in the future. And if you've got a parent with Alzheimer's or something else, do you then test? And if you test positive, every time you're at work, is somebody looking? And it's a huge kind of ethical problem that I think is going to be more pertinent for the wider population. With Huntington's, I think 93 the test came in, and it's it's fairly new. But I think it will. The breast cancer one is case in point, but I think it will come out further.
This is Jacqui Harrison. We're up close with Jacqui, and we're going to find out about her life and the awareness she's trying to raise. And that was the dilemma that she had to face. Which I think is an incredibly brave thing to do. For those who don't know, what is Huntington's?
So it's a neurodegenerative disease, and it's a genetic one. So you're born with the gene. If you've got a parent with Huntington's, every child has a 50% chance of getting the disease. So it's a toss of a coin each time. So if you're a family of 5, all 5 of you could get it. None of you could get it. 4 out of 5 could get it. So each time it's a new toss of the coin. So you've got that gene, and generally, not always, it kind of manifests in kind of between sort of 30s and mid 40s, but it's on a spectrum like any of these things. So there's a juvenile variant, so people are developing it 8, 9, 10. So you could get a situation, the father's got it, and I know a case with 2 of the children. A woman lost her husband and both of her children before their 10th birthday, and which is, it's hard enough in middle age, but incredibly hard, juvenile Huntington's. And then also quite a later onset, where it can be sometimes misdiagnosed as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, other things, because some of the symptoms have similarities. But in our family, it's very much a sort of classic presentation, if you want to call it. All our family, I don't think nobody's survived beyond 50. Mark's 47 now. And the most visible sign is what the chorea, it used to be back in the day called Huntington's chorea, and chorea is the Greek word for dance. And somebody with Huntington's, they look as though they're drunk. Really, they're quite a spectacle. Their gait is uneven, their arms are flailing about, their words are slurring, and they can look as though they're drunk, which has caused a lot of stigma today and historically. You're quite a spectacle.
They used to say it was connected with witchcraft. I'm going back a bit.
Back in the day, they thought that. There's a lot of... I did a master's looking at the secrecy and stigma, because people have kept it secret because it's a family disease, and you're the kind of odd family in the street whose my mother died in Stores Hall in Huddersfield because there wasn't... My grandmother had 2 children at home, and both her children with Huntington's, and probably couldn't manage. So they're the family whose mother's in the lunatic asylum, who's been kind of flailing about in the street. So you look very odd. It's got an odd kind of physical presentation. So in the past, they did think that these families were witches. And there's a historian called Wexler. There's 2 sisters, Nancy and Alice Wexler. Nancy Wexler was part of the team that actually went to Venezuela. There's a village in Venezuela where there's a big proportion of people have Huntington's, so it was useful to study, because there's a lot of families and a lot of them have Huntington's, and that's where they first identified the gene. Anyway, her sister Alice is a historian, and she did a lot of studies, because they thought the Salem witches in America were connected to Huntington's, and she disproved it. But she talked to families, and she said they were actually really disappointed, because she said they could, at least if people thought we were witches, it kind of... You can understand why they ostracised us and crossed over the road and stopped coming.
It's far more cruel.
But actually, it's more cruel because we're not witches and we're humans, and so it's got an interesting history.
Okay. We are up close this afternoon with Jacqui Harrison. She lives in Brighouse, and we are talking about the disease that's framed her life. It's not defined it, but framed her life, and that's been Huntington's disease. And we'll find out what happened along the way, and it's not an easy story. And yet here she is. She's not carrying the disease. She had a 50-50 chance of developing it. And she's made the very most of her life, as well as caring for a brother who does have Huntington's. And we'll hear more with BBC Radio Leeds on this Monday afternoon. We're up close this hour with Jacqui Harrison from Brighouse. She is a carer for her brother Mark, who has Huntington's disease. This, by the way, is a condition. It causes certain nerve cells in the brain to waste away. It then robs you of the ability to talk, to walk, to move, to think, or to swallow. There is no treatment for Huntington's, and there is no cure. And you've been looking after Mark, your brother, since he was 12. How old were you?
I was 18. Well, our mum died when I was 12 and Mark was 6, and we were looked after by our grandmother. So she'd seen her husband die of Huntington's, and then her daughter, and then her son. So when mum died, I was 12 and Mark was 6, and Nana took over our care. She died when I was 18, and Mark was 12, and I became his guardian when I was 18, and I've had him on and off ever since. We talked about the physical side, which is the sort of main side that people recognise and the main test, but they've done a lot of studies now, and they think there's a lot of stuff going on in the brain kind of 10, maybe 15 years before a physical onset is kind of visible. So he's been very, very bright. He's got 2 degrees. He went to Leeds University, got a degree in English, and he went to Huddersfield University, got a degree in history. But never kind of worked or settled or had a relationship, and you don't know whether it's due to a disruptive upbringing with a sister who, you know, it's not a stable situation. Neither of us have really, or whether that was kind of the disease manifesting before the physical symptoms.
What's he like?
He's witty, he's clever, he's funny. The last 8 weeks have been hell because he's had a huge dip. It's quite a slow disease. I'll talk about Sybil, our dog, but we've got a border terrier who's important to the story, unwittingly. And we lost her at 14 and a half, and all of that time he's been ill. So it's quite a long time for a disease, but the last 7 weeks have been a real dip. So he's gone from somebody to a degree, he's engaged and he can communicate a bit, somebody very, very poorly. And that's been a big challenge over the last 8 weeks. As a carer, my world has got very small, and kind of things have been difficult for a long time. But I feel that I'm entering a realm of nursing that is out of my depth, really. And specialist care for somebody with Huntington's is really expensive. You're looking at about 2,900 a week.
And if that were to be deemed to be necessary, you would have to fund that?
We would hope to get funding, but I don't think it's that easy. And I think it's part of a wider care crisis, isn't it? There's funding problems for all sorts of diseases, and complex ones are expensive.
But what happens if, with all the best will and love in the world, you can't give him at least the quality of life and care? Not because you don't want to, but you physically can't. What happens then? At
the moment we're sort of trying to muddle through and trying to get more carers on board at home, or I have to start fighting for the specialist care, which is expensive because he needs that for it's a complex disease. He's a young man as well. You fall between a lot of gaps.
How old is he now?
He's 47 now. So it's got a physical aspect in that he's not mobile. He's got cognition problems, psychiatric problems. So you kind of get passed around a lot of places, and really you need somebody that is a specialist in the disease because it is so problem.
Isn't there one local?
There are specialist places. The nearest to us is out of our area, and like I say, expensive. So to get funding.
So no one's ever been able to refer you to that, or
that would be a care home, a specialist care home, and then he has neurologists. He has a neurologist kind of separate, but a specialist care homes for Huntington's are really expensive and few and far between. So it's a problem.
You know, many people who are carers, and there'll be some listening now, you know, no one really knows the emotion of it, the relentlessness of it. And it's not a measure of how much you love that person. It's just the way in which your life has to be their life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how you keep yourself from not declining. I mean, how do you keep yourself from not, thinking, I can't do this anymore? Because there is very little life of your own. Very
little. So even to come today, my partner is at home with Mark. We've got carers for 2 hours, so the rest of the time we're doing it. So couldn't do it without Tony. Yeah, big shout to him. It's difficult because your world completely shrinks. So your horizon is kind of Asda, Fixby and Tom Garden Centre and Shibden Park. And now with this sudden decline, the world has shrunk to your four walls. And I think that's why I'm struggling a bit with it. It's like, how do I get him back so we can at least participate in life? So I think the awareness thing and this going back to Sybil, the Border Terrier, and the Sybil on Tour thing has kept me.
Now, what's Sybil on Tour? We'll talk a little bit more in a moment, but tell me about Sybil on Tour and being up Everest.
So Sybil on Tour, a little felt dog. So I brought you a very special Yorkshire Sybil.
Thank
so there's one or two about, but not many.
Have you sewn this yourself?
I've sewn that myself.
Well,
I have no talent in sewing. I didn't go to the brownies, and I think I probably did a bit of
I'm holding this gorgeous felt doggy, which sort of just fits in the palm of my hand. Beautifully stitched, may I say.
She's got a Yorkshire rose on her.
She's got a Yorkshire rose on and the yellow ribbon, and it says, with love, Sybil on Tour. So what does Sybil represent?
So she was inspired by our little Border Terrier who, like I say, we lost at 14 and a half, but was with Mark through when he started kind of physically to be showing signs of Huntington's. And as his conditions got worse, my will's become smaller. So you don't go to the gym, you don't go out on your bike, you don't go out with friends as much. So you're in the house. And I made some for Christmas presents, little Sybils, and then my friend started said, "Oh, that's really good. I'd like one. I'll give you a tenner for it." Oh, that's okay then. That's a project. And so I started making them, and people donated to the Huntington's Disease Association, and I've just made 500 in Huntington's Disease Youth Association colours, and people are donating money to name one. So you've got one named Liz. So we've got all sorts of lovely names. Right. And the Sybils go around the world. So I've sent them around the world, including one to the top of Everest.
Well, this one's not going to top Everest. It's going to stay here with me in West Yorkshire. And looks great. It's great stitching. Can I just say?
Thank you very much.
You're far better at this than I am. We're up close this afternoon. It's the story of a full-time carer. It's a story of a campaigner. It's also a story of a survivor, because she did have a 50-50 chance of having the genetic predisposition to have Huntington's disease, and as her brother has. And we are finding out about what her life is like and what it's like to be in that particular situation. We'll have more for you from Jacqui in a moment. Harrison is here. She lives in the Calder Valley, and she's caring for her brother Mark, who has Huntington's. But can you remember a time in your life when this disease wasn't there?
No, I don't think I can, which is sad, really. So I think we didn't have an unhappy childhood. I think thanks to a remarkable grandmother, like how she had the kind of tenacity or courage or whatever to, like, she lost her husband and then watched both her children develop it, and still cared for Mark and I, and we always went to school, both educated. Dad breakfast and everything. I don't know how she did it, but I can remember going to visit Mum in Stores Hall, which was a traumatic thing as a 12-year-old child.
For those who don't know, Stores Hall was a Victorian lunatic asylum. It then became a mental health establishment with a long history behind it, and is no more and hasn't been for a long time. But there are stories aplenty about life in there and those who were there when mental health treatment was completely and utterly different from how we would see it today. And I think at the age of, how old would you have been?
Well, 12 when she died.
Going up to Stores Hall as a young woman, a young girl, it's bad enough now, frankly.
And my mother had been a school teacher. She taught at Hollywell Green, junior infants, and then after at St Andrews in Brighow. So again, she'd been to university, done teacher training, and clever, kind of beautiful, intelligent woman, and then reduced to somebody physically and mentally suffering with Huntington's. And I imagine, I don't know, I wasn't privy to the conversations, but obviously my grandmother couldn't cope with two small children, 2 children under 12 and two adults with Huntington. I know how hard it is with kind of 2 of us chasing after Mark. It's a full-time job. So you've not got a lot of ordinary memories, but it wasn't a sort of sad house. I don't think our house, it has been sad over the last few weeks. I've been a lot of shouting and it's been quite stressful, but generally it's been quite a happy house. And on a Monday afternoon, usually with Mark, until only several 8 weeks ago, we have a singing corner. So, well, we call it singing. If you heard us, you might not agree. But we have a singing corner, and some friends of mine come, and it's glorified karaoke. But he loves it, Mark, and we have a really good time. So,
how aware is he of what's wrong? I mean, he obviously knows, but can he computate what's happening to him or not?
Not very. I think he has lucid moments, but it's a huge problem with the disease. Problems. It depends, not for the person who has the disease, it's probably a good thing that they don't know. For the carers, it's a difficult thing. So there's quite a lot of unawareness about it. Some people think it's denial in that you've watched a parent go through it, you might have watched siblings, cousins go through it. So it's kind of, well, this can't be happening to me. Or some people think the actually organics of the brain mean that they're not aware as to how bad it is, but it can lead to problems with regards to benefits and things. Again, part of a wider benefits crisis. So people are wanting to claim benefits, and the assessors are coming in to see the person with Huntington's. Well, I can do this. I can do that. I can, of course I can drive. It was funny. I said on my thing about driving.
You've just learned to drive.
I recently learned to drive. And I'd not learnt as a child, because I can remember being in the car as a child and being pulled up in Brighouse because my uncle was driving the car, probably showing symptoms of Huntington's disease, and I thought he was drunk. Really vivid memory. So I thought, well, what's the point? What's the point in learning to drive if I'm only going to, if I get this disease, then I'm only going to have it taken away. It's one of the first things that a lot of people lose is the driving, and it's a big thing. So anyway, I must have got near 50 and thought, before I tested, I thought I'll give this driving a go. Not a big struggle and a big thing. Anyway, I passed it, which is a different story. But it was funny with Mark, who'd been poorly a long time at that point. And I said, I've passed my driving test. So if anything happened to Tony and he had to be in hospital, that would be really good, because I wouldn't have to get the bus. Well, no, Jacqui, I'd drive. And he passed his test at 18, never driven in his life, and obviously just impossible. But that, no, of course. So it's a big problem is the unawareness thing. Yeah.
We've just had a message from Pam in Sisset. She says, great that you are highlighting Huntington's. She's a family member of the disease, and the other carries the gene. My daughter-in-law Jo and her sister Claire do wonderful fundraising events and challenges. In fact, Jo is a volunteer of the year, raising the most money. I think there is optimism for a cure or for a relief for sufferers for the future. Your guest Jacqui is doing a great job. More money and information about the disease can only be good, and financial help for patients to be cared for other than by family members. I'm very proud, says Pam, of my extended family members for the work and caring that they do. That makes you feel as if you're not completely alone.
No, well, it's a small world, is Huntington's, and I know Jo and
all right,
Jo and Claire. So yeah, they do. They've raised thousands. Yeah.
Here's a question for you, which I don't want you to interpret that this wasn't a choice and you haven't embraced it fully. But in a way, your life's not been your own since you were 18. I mean, there were things you didn't do and are still not doing. You're not a parent. You didn't go to university then. You almost, do you ever get frustrated and bitter that that's kind of gone and you can't go back to that?
I think it's hard, isn't it? I'm a pessimist. I'm not bitter, especially. I kind of did it. probably because I had a grandmother to do it, who did it. She could have, when her daughter and son died, walked out and said, okay, that, you know, left us to a children's home and whatever would have become of us. And she didn't do that. But I think kind of societal, I was 18 and took on the care of a 12-year-old with not a massive sort of support. And nobody came to me and said, oh, you're a bright girl, you know, would you like to go to university? So I got a job because I had a house to run, a child to educate and feed and clothe and things. And so I did a series of kind of boring jobs, really. Finally went to university as a mature student, which was a big achievement. And I think they would be kind of proud of that, really, because, like I say, my mother was a teacher. And so kind of opportunities like that were lost. And then it's just the ordinary things. I travel now vicariously through a small felt dog because holidays are kind of a bit of a drag. I can't imagine being sat on a beach. It's quite bizarre. And somebody said, oh, well, does it upset you that we're sending these photos? So no, absolutely. It fills me with joy. And I mean, the Everest thing was just incredible. This little thing from Brighouse that went via Wales. And these two guys were trekking to Nepal. And I said, oh, what about seeing if you can get to the summit? Not in my wildest dreams believing that would be possible. And a message came through on a Sunday and he said, are you sitting down? I said, yeah. And he sent this photograph of Sybil on the top of Everest with this guy called Wanda Sherpa who'd been the hospitality at Everest Base Camp and then been summited. And it's just the most beautiful sort of life-affirming photograph and that connection. And I think the Sybil, I've made connections all over the world with her, and I have to shout out to really the Border Terrier people as well, because there's the thing on Twitter called the hashtag BT Posse, and they've just been amazing. There can't be many Border Terrier people that don't know about Sybil on tour, and it's great because you're reaching out to a network beyond families, like Joe and Claire's cousin. They know it in their family, and you know it because you live in it, but you need to get that awareness into the wider community. And because it's a genetic disease and in your family, if you've not got the gene, you don't need to really worry about it.
I understand that. So it's within those groups of people who are vulnerable. When you look to the future and a time when maybe the world might not be as small, you've a long-standing partner who's obviously amazing. What do you want for the future?
It's a hard one, isn't it? I was thinking coming in. I don't know. Some documentary maker to take me around the world and visit all the Sybils would be really nice. It's because it's the end of Huntington's disease for our family. It ends with Mark, and it will end at some point in the very near future, the fairly near future. You're not a carer anymore, but you've not got a job, you've not got a role, you've not got an identity. It's a hard one, isn't it? And you've not got the financial thing set up that you would have if you'd been working for 30 years. I've not had the income of 30 years. I've not had pension for 30 years. So I don't know. It's a hard one.
Well, I wish I could give you a magic wand in so many different ways. Thank you for coming in to see us. It's really a pleasure to meet you, and I wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to find more out about Sybil,
it's Hounds for Huntington's hashtag Sybil on tour. We're on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. I'm at JAQ421 on Twitter. And I think you can tweet it out. I want you to tweet a picture.
Okay,
Please.
We'll do that. No, we'll do that. Thank you very much for coming in. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up close on BBC Radio Leeds, Jacqui Harrison and her story. 19 minutes to 3.